I insisted on hiring a nanny. Everything revolved around the child and the eternal lack of time. Early shifts, orders, paperwork, and in this cycle, I was losing myself. I dreamed of getting back at least a few quiet minutes, calmly drinking a cup of tea, thinking clearly. I need help, I said, hoping that it would save not only me, but also our home. She came to our house as if she had been created to make everything easier. Her name was Alina, young, neat, with a soft smile and easy to talk to. The child ran happily to her, clinging to her legs. Those first days were like a fog of relief. Someone you could trust with your most precious possession. My husband supported the decision, saying it was reasonable. He looked tired, but I believed it was from overwork. Together, we discussed the nanny's responsibilities, schedule, and pay. Simple, everyday decisions that could not destroy love or trust. I imagined how I would regain my balance. I would be a good wife, a good mother, and a person who had time for dreams. Everything went perfectly in the first few weeks. Alina played with the child, put him to bed, her warm voice making the house feel softer. I couldn't imagine that the kindness I had let into my home could turn into a disaster. Little things began to add up to a strange picture. At first, I only noticed small details. My husband's gaze lingering on Alina's face longer than was appropriate. His laughter when he told me about work and immediately added, "Alina made the child laugh so much today that I forgot about everything." He said it casually, and I tried to think that it was just the joy of interacting with children. Over time, I noticed another oddity. My husband started coming home from work earlier than usual. He sincerely said that he wanted to spend time with the children, help with dinner and play. Sometimes I would go to the kitchen and see him sitting with the child and Alina smiling, telling something funny. In the evening, he would drive Alina home himself, saying goodbye as if to a close friend. I thought it was just kindness and friendliness, and I didn't suspect anything. But small details began to form a pattern of concern. My husband's phone was often face down, and calls were suddenly interrupted. Alina, remaining as warm and easygoing as ever, sometimes jokingly called him uncle. And in these words, there was a note of trust that was inaccessible to me. One morning, I saw them together in the living room. He was reading a children's book aloud, and she was laughing so hard that it became physically difficult for me to breathe. I approached, smiled, and noticed her hand barely touching his shoulder. At that moment, a whole network of possible betrayals arose in my mind. I kept quiet, watched, and tried to believe that it was just a friendship between a man who loved children and the child who needed care. But the image that had settled in my head wouldn't leave me alone. Little things added up to a feeling of betrayal even before I could point to anything specific. I didn't want to destroy the home because of a maybe, but my gut whispered, "Be brave, check it out." And fear, rare and slow, began to eat away at me. Once I had to go to my mother's for a few days. She was sick and I decided to help. The children stayed at home with the nanny and I thought everything was under control, but this turned out to be my most fatal mistake. Alina started staying with us overnight, under the pretext that it was more convenient for the child, and at that time, nothing foreshadowed trouble. When I returned home earlier than planned, I found them in bed together. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream, and I didn't rush over to them. I just quietly left the house. I remember banging my head against the wall, crying silently, thinking that my world had fallen apart. But then a cold, calculated calmness came over me. The crying gave way to silence. I sat there for a long time, thinking not about the past, but about the future. My plan for revenge became clear. Not just to leave, but to show everyone who was really to blame. I called my husband and said I would only be back in the evening, so they would have time to prepare for my return. And when I came back, I didn't let on. It was as if I hadn't noticed anything. When I returned, I felt disgusted by what was going on between my husband and the nanny. I wanted to put them in their place once and for all. But it was still too early. The plan required patience and precision. I decided to arrange everything so as to create the perfect moment for revenge. I began to think through every step. How to get my husband drunk, how to set the scene to get rid of Alina and frame him. In my mind, I could already see the knife in his hand and all the evidence pointing to him. It seemed that everything was going according to plan. But for now, I had to wait. I bought an expensive bottle of whiskey for my husband's birthday, beautifully wrapped so that the gift would look sincere. I secretly mixed a sleeping pill into his glass. Everything was calculated down to the smallest detail. My husband happily accepted the gift, suspecting nothing. And a couple of days later, I went away to my mother's, pretending that I had things to do and worries. In reality, I settled into a hotel nearby. I knew that in the evening, the couple would once again be having fun, drinking cognac and losing themselves in each other. My patience and cold calculation allowed me to watch them from afar without giving myself away, preparing the perfect moment for revenge. When night fell, everything was ready. I knew that emotions, alcohol and sleeping pills would make the scene convincing, and everyone would believe that he was the real culprit behind the destruction of the family. When I returned home at night, the house was plunged into semi-darkness. The light in the living room was barely flickering, and I saw them, my husband and Alina, sleeping in the same bed. A cold, calculating calmness filled me completely. I took out the knife I had hidden beforehand. Approaching quietly, I stabbed Alina. One precise, instantaneous blow, and her breathing stopped. My heart sank, but my mind was focused on only one goal: revenge. I placed the knife in my husband's hand so that the scene would look natural, as if he were the culprit. To make sure the neighbors heard and called the police, I deliberately broke a window. The crash echoed throughout the yard. Then I calmly left the house, leaving my husband trapped by circumstances and Alina forever. The neighbors heard the noise, called the police, and everything went according to plan. My husband was arrested, Alina died, and I remained above suspicion. Weeks of investigation, court and testimony passed. Outwardly, I remained the victim, and he remained the villain. But inside me, a cold emptiness settled in. Revenge had been achieved, but the price was incredibly high. Sleepless nights, the look in my child's eyes, who didn't understand why his father no longer came home, and the burden of conscience that was impossible to hide. Everything in the house remained as before, but now it felt alien. People looked at me with pity and respect at the same time. I walked through the rooms, remembering what had happened and what had been done. Sometimes I thought that if I could go back, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But now I knew. Revenge had been taken. Justice was just an illusion, and the price was too high. Thank you for listening to my story until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe to the channel Love, Lies and Revenge and give this video a like. It really helps. I wish you all the best and many happy moments.